Off the northern coast of Japan, on a windless morning, the surface of the sea gives no sign of what is happening 20 meters below. 6 orcas swim in formation with no apparent hurry. They are not hunting yet. They are waiting. 400 meters away, moving in the opposite direction, a great white shark, 5 meters long, detects the chemical disturbance in the water before seeing them. What it does next is not attack. It is not resistance. It is abandonment. In less than 3 minutes, the most feared predator of the open ocean disappears into deeper waters, leaving the territory without a fight. That scene is repeated in the North Pacific, in the South Atlantic, along the coasts of South Africa. The ocean does not belong to the largest or the most armed. It belongs to the most intelligent. And understanding why that is possible requires starting from the beginning, the waters of northeastern Japan, where the Kuroshio Current rises loaded with tropical heat and the Oyashio Current descends from the Arctic loaded with nutrients. When they meet, they generate one of the most complex and violent food chains on the planet. This is where it all begins. Where the Kuroshio Current and the Oyashio Current meet off the coasts of Hokkaido and Tohoku, neither of them fully gives way. The result is an active oceanic boundary, a permanent mixing zone where cold water drags nutrients up from the depths and warm water exposes them to light. In bands only tens of kilometers wide, plankton concentration can increase 100-fold. Herring and mackerel arrive first in schools that can stretch for kilometers. Each fish follows its neighbors through the lateral line, responding to their changes in direction in milliseconds, without central hierarchy. The collective response emerges from simple local rules repeated by thousands of individuals simultaneously, which makes it impossible for a single predator to isolate a target. Then come those that pursue them, tuna, dolphins, sea lions, and then those that hunt them all. But that collective defense has a limit that predators have learned to exploit. Bluefin tuna, when working in groups, swim in concentric circles around the school, compressing it from the edges toward the center. As the school tightens to close the gaps opened by individual attacks, it reaches such a density that the fish inside no longer have space to maneuver. The defensive efficiency of the group becomes a trap for its own members. The tuna then cut through the school in a straight line, capturing fish that cannot move aside. The same adaptation that protects the school against a solitary predator makes it vulnerable to a coordinated strategy. The productivity of these waters also attracts animals that do not hunt at all for most of the year. Fin whales, second in size only to blue whales, move to these latitudes in summer following the pulse of krill. An adult fin whale consumes up to 2 tons of food per day, accumulating fat reserves that will sustain it during migration and the winter in tropical waters where it barely eats. Its baleen system filters water at speeds exceeding 10 kilometers per hour. It opens its jaw, engulfs thousands of liters with everything they contain, closes its mouth, and pushes the water back out through the baleen plates, retaining the solids. In each lunge, it captures several hundred kilograms of biomass. To the south, the waters become warmer and light penetrates deeper. The richness generated by the northern currents also feeds the tropical waters of Okinawa, where coral reefs sustain one of the densest biological communities in the ocean. Less than 1% of the global seafloor is covered by coral, but in that 1% lives 25% of all known marine species. Coral is not just a geological formation. It is a living city built by millions of organisms that have spent 400 million years perfecting the architecture of their own refuge. Inside that city operates one of the strangest biological relationships that exist, the alliance between the clownfish and the sea anemone. The anemone has tentacles covered with stinging cells capable of paralyzing fish in tenths of a second. The clownfish lives among those tentacles intact without receiving a single discharge. What protects it is a mucus layer of glycoproteins that covers its body and mimics the chemical signature of the anemone's own tissues, causing the animal's defensive system not to recognize it as a threat. It is not immunity. It is chemical camouflage. The fish does not deceive the predator, it deceives the weapon of the animal that hosts it. The anemone also benefits. The clownfish cleans its tentacles, drives away fish that might eat it, and oxygenates the water around it. But there is a dimension of this species that has no parallel in any other reef vertebrate. All clownfish are born male. When the dominant female dies, the largest reproductive male completely and irreversibly changes sex within a matter of weeks. It produces eggs, assumes the reproductive role, and the group continues. It is not behavioral adaptation, it is biological reprogramming triggered by absence. On the beaches bordering those same tropical waters, one of the oldest events in the ocean occurs every year. Sea turtles carry in their nervous system a geographical memory of extraordinary precision. An adult female can spend 20 or 30 years in the open ocean, traveling thousands of kilometers, and return to lay eggs on the same beach where she was born, navigating by the Earth's magnetic field. She arrives at night, lays between 80 and 120 eggs, and returns to the sea before dawn. What she leaves in the sand is only a possibility. 65 days later, the hatchlings dig upward, emerge in groups, and orient themselves toward the brightest point on the horizon. The race lasts minutes. In those minutes, frigate birds, ghost crabs, and sharks take their share. Out of every 1,000 hatchlings that reach the water, only one will reach reproductive age. This is not a statistic of failure. It is the statistic that has sustained the species for 110 million years. The current problem is that nest temperature determines the sex of the hatchlings, and warming is producing nests with female proportions that in some populations already exceed 90%. A species that survived the extinction of the dinosaurs is being destabilized by a temperature change of less than 2 degrees. Below the surface of the western Pacific tropical waters, light does not arrive uniformly. It filters through the water in columns that twist with the movement of the waves, creating zones of brightness and shadow that change every second. In this environment, where visibility can exceed 30 meters, transparency itself becomes a trap. Whoever can be seen can be hunted, and whoever can hunt unseen has an advantage over everything else. The coral reefs of Okinawa are, in that sense, a permanent battlefield disguised as a garden. Coral structures do not grow at random. Hard coral colonies build their calcium carbonate skeletons over decades, raising formations that can reach tens of meters in height. Each of those polyps, the living organism inside the mineral structure, measures only a few millimeters. Their survival depends on a symbiosis with microscopic algae called zooxanthellae that live within their tissues and produce, through photosynthesis, up to 90% of the energy the coral needs. This dependence on light means reefs can only exist in shallow, transparent waters, but it also means that any factor that clouds the water or raises the temperature enough for the coral to expel the algae triggers bleaching. The structure loses its color, the organism is left without energy, and if the disturbance lasts more than a few weeks, it dies. What remains is the white mineral skeleton, lifeless, which can take decades to be recolonized. In the reefs that still function, the density of interactions between species has no equivalent in any other marine ecosystem. The parrotfish scrapes the coral with its beak-shaped fused teeth, ingests the calcareous material along with the algae that grow on it, and expels sand. An adult parrotfish can produce more than 100 kilograms of white sand per year. The fine sandy beaches of many Pacific atolls are, in part, a direct product of this digestive process. The surgeonfish uses a retractable spine on each side of the base of the tail, so sharp it can cut with surgical precision to defend its territory from algae. The stonefish, perfectly camouflaged among rocks and dead coral, waits motionless until prey passes within striking distance and then launches itself in a fraction of a second. It is the fastest attack documented in a marine vertebrate, from 0 to maximum speed in less than 15 milliseconds. The moray eel plays a different role. It can reach 3 meters in length and lives in crevices and caves in the reef, with its mouth permanently open, not as a sign of aggression, but because that is the only way it has to circulate water over its gills. Its teeth point backward. Any prey that enters its mouth can only move forward. What few observe is that the moray eel has two jaws. The outer one captures the prey. The pharynx, a second jaw located further back, projects forward inside the mouth, grabs what has been captured, and drags it inward. It is the only known vertebrate with this functional double jaw system, and it owes its existence to the same evolutionary pressure that generated all the strategies of the reef. The need to retain the little that is obtained in an environment where competition never ceases. At greater depth, where light begins to fade and water temperature drops, the reefs give way to the twilight zone, between 40 and 200 meters, where the blue darkens until it becomes almost black at its edges. Here the density of life of the shallow reef disappears and the ocean reveals a different logic. Animals become scarcer but larger. Hunting strategies become more sophisticated because encounters are less frequent and there is no second chance. In that band of water where visibility decreases with each meter of depth, the sensory system of predators stops relying primarily on sight and begins to incorporate other mechanisms: detection of vibrations, of electrical fields, of chemical gradients that persist in the water for hours after the organism that produced them has already moved away. Reef sharks that patrol that intermediate zone operate under a logic of strict energy efficiency. A shark cannot afford energy expenditures on failed pursuits. Its metabolism, although more efficient than that of many bony fish, requires regular captures to sustain the constant movement it needs to breathe. The shark does not have a swim bladder. If it stops swimming, it sinks. This physiological constraint forces it into constant motion and, at the same time, to calculate precisely when an acceleration is worth the energy cost. The lateral line, a system of fluid-filled channels that runs along both flanks of the body and detects minimal changes in water pressure, allows it to perceive the movement of a fish at distances where sight does not reach. The ampullae of Lorenzini, concentrated in the snout, detect the electrical fields generated by the muscular activity of any living animal. A shark can locate a ray buried under the sand without needing to see or smell it, following only the electrical pulse of its heart. The hammerhead shark takes that capability to the extreme. Its head, the cephalofoil, is a flat structure that extends laterally and distributes the ampullae of Lorenzini over a much larger surface area than that of any other shark. The result is a detection system that works like a sweeper. It can cover a wide strip of the seafloor on each pass, increasing the probability of locating hidden prey that no other predator would find. The shape of the head, which for decades generated speculation about its function, is in fact an engineering solution to a detection problem, and it has a side effect. The eyes, positioned at the ends of the cephalofoil, are separated by up to 1 meter in the larger species, which provides an almost 360-degree field of vision and a stereoscopic forward vision that surpasses that of any other shark. In warmer waters, where reefs are shallower and temperatures more stable, the tiger shark operates with a different strategy. It is not a specialist, it is an absolute generalist, and that is its advantage. Its dentition is unique among sharks. The teeth have serrated edges and a specific curvature that allows it to cut materials that no other shark could process. It has been documented ingesting turtles with shells, seabirds, sea lions, smaller sharks, and human-origin waste. This dietary breadth makes it a system cleaner. It removes weakened organisms, eliminates carcasses, and maintains the balance of populations that, without an opportunistic predator of this range, would grow uncontrollably. The tiger shark is not feared for being the most efficient. It is feared for being the most unpredictable. The reef octopus operates in the same territory with a radically different strategy from any other predator. It has no skeleton. It has no armor. Its only physical protection is a skin that can change color, texture, and pattern in less than a second, precisely imitating the surface it rests on. Coral, rock, sand, algae. The chromatophores in its skin are cells that contain pigment sacs controlled by muscles directly connected to the nervous system. When the octopus activates those muscles, the sacs expand and the pigment becomes visible. When it relaxes them, the sacs contract and the color disappears. The entire process occurs without identifiable conscious brain processing. It is a direct response of the peripheral nerves to visual information. In other words, the octopus's skin sees and responds on its own, partially independent of the central brain. Its intelligence, however, does not reside in the skin. The octopus has the most complex nervous system of all invertebrates. 2/3 of its neurons are distributed in its 8 arms, not in the central brain. Each arm can solve tactile problems in a semi-autonomous way, opening a container, manipulating a lock, exploring a crevice, without waiting for instructions from the main brain. When an octopus extends an arm to explore a dark cavity while the rest of the body remains outside, that arm is making local decisions based on the information it receives directly, without central coordination. It is a completely different nervous architecture from that of any vertebrate, and it has produced problem-solving capacities that have no equivalent among invertebrates. In the shallow tropical waters of the Western Pacific also lives one of the most lethal animals in the ocean relative to its size, the box jellyfish. Unlike conventional jellyfish, which have a minimal nervous system and move mainly with currents, the box jellyfish has true eyes with cornea, iris, lens, and retina capable of forming images. It has 24 eyes grouped into 4 structures called ropalia, and it can actively swim at speeds of up to 6 kilometers per hour. Its tentacles, which can reach 3 meters in length, are covered with nematocysts that fire in microseconds upon contact, injecting a venom that acts simultaneously on the nervous system, the heart, and the skin. The lethal dose for a human can be reached with barely 2 square meters of tentacle contact with the skin. In severe cases, cardiovascular collapse occurs within minutes. On the coasts of Australia and the Indo-Pacific, their seasonal presence determines beach closures more strictly than any shark sighting. The reef also has a sonic dimension that determines its own survival. In shallow waters, the biological noise it generates, the snapping of mantis shrimp, the vocalizations of parrotfish, and the drumming of damselfish, forms a constant soundscape that animals use as a navigational reference. Fish and crustacean larvae orient themselves toward reefs by swimming in the direction of sound before they can see the structure. When the reef dies and falls silent, those larvae can no longer find it. The acoustic degradation of the reef is a collapse mechanism that does not appear in any satellite image or coral cover index, but it determines whether the next generation of reef species will arrive or not. Beyond the outer edge of the reef, the continental shelf ends. The seafloor drops off abruptly, and the ocean becomes pelagic, open water in every direction with no walls, no shelter, no substrate. For the animals that live here, the ocean has no perceptible limits on the horizontal plane, but it does on the vertical one. Depth is the axis that organizes everything. As one descends, temperature falls, pressure rises, and light diminishes until it disappears entirely. Every 100 meters mark a boundary of conditions that evolution has taken millions of years to overcome, and only a few lineages of life have managed to cross. In the surface pelagic zone, down to 200 meters, speed dominates. Large bluefin tuna can maintain 70 kilometers per hour over sustained periods, a feat that requires a cardiovascular and muscular system radically different from that of most fish. They are functionally warm-blooded. A countercurrent blood exchange system in the muscles preserves the heat generated by movement and maintains body temperature several degrees above that of the water. This allows them to operate at full capacity in cold waters, where other predators slow down. The same adaptation exists in the great white shark, and it is what explains why this animal can hunt with equal efficiency in the freezing waters of South Africa or Hokkaido and in the temperate waters of California. The adult great white shark can reach 6 meters in length and exceed 2 tons in weight. Its top speed in pursuit approaches 40 kilometers per hour, but its deadliest hunting technique is not based on horizontal speed. It is based on verticality. Seals, sea lions, and penguins spend a considerable amount of time at the surface, breathing, resting, moving slowly. The shark detects them from below by projecting their silhouettes against the surface light, rises vertically at maximum speed, and strikes from underneath before the prey can react. The impact is so powerful that in some attacks the animal breaks completely out of the water. It is not learned behavior. It is a technique used by all great white sharks in certain regions with minor variations, suggesting that it is a strategy encoded in the species rather than an individual innovation. At 300 meters depth begins the mesopelagic zone, where sunlight becomes only a barely perceptible shade of dark blue. Here lives one of the most abundant groups of organisms on the planet in terms of total biomass, but also one of the least known, mesopelagic fish. Many of them perform every day the largest vertical migration in the biosphere. At dusk, they rise toward the surface to feed on the plankton that grows there. At dawn, they sink back down. This daily movement of millions of tons of biomass is one of the most important carbon transport mechanisms in the ocean. Organisms capture organic carbon at the surface and deposit it in the depths when they excrete or die. Without that migration, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would be significantly higher. The pressure of predation in that zone has produced some of the most extreme morphological solutions that exist in any ecosystem on the planet. The viperfish has teeth so large relative to the size of its body that they do not fit inside its mouth. Its lower jaw cannot fully close because the fangs exceed its length. That is not a defect. It is the design of an animal that feeds in an environment where encounters with prey are so infrequent that each one must be definitive. The long teeth increase the capture surface, making it possible to seize fish that would otherwise escape through the sides of the mouth. The viperfish also cannot bite repeatedly to hold its prey. Capture must be simultaneous and complete on the first contact. Its spine is flexible backward at an angle that no other fish can reach, allowing it to bend its head back to swallow prey larger than its own head. The deep-sea anglerfish has solved the same problem of encounter scarcity through a different mechanism. It carries its lure with it. The luminous appendage it projects from its head, a modification of the first dorsal spine, contains bioluminescent bacteria in symbiosis. The light they emit is not produced by the fish. It is produced by bacteria, which the fish hosts in exchange for nutrients. The lure oscillates just a few centimeters from the anglerfish's mouth, which remains motionless in total darkness. Any organism attracted by the light enters directly into the strike zone. The anglerfish's jaw can open to an angle of 180 degrees, and its stomach is highly distensible. It can swallow prey twice its own size, meaning a successful encounter can cover its energy needs for days or weeks. In females, the dwarf males of some species physically fuse to the body after finding them. Their tissues integrate, their circulatory systems connect, and the male loses all independent function except the reproductive one. It becomes a parasite on its own mate. Further down, beyond 1,000 meters, begins the bathypelagic zone, complete darkness, temperatures close to 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, pressure exceeding 100 kilograms per square centimeter. In this environment, bioluminescence is the only available visual language. 80% of the animals that inhabit these depths produce their own light through chemical reactions involving the enzyme luciferase. That light does not serve to illuminate the environment. It serves to communicate, to attract prey, and in some cases, to confuse predators. The lanternfish carries a row of photophores along its belly that, when seen from below, mimic the faint illumination of the surface, erasing its silhouette for any predator searching from beneath. It is an evolutionary countermeasure. The hunter hides its presence by adopting the appearance of the surrounding environment. The sperm whale is the only predator that moves freely between the illuminated world of the surface and these abyssal darknesses. An adult male can exceed 20 meters in length and 50 tons in weight, but what truly defines this animal is its diving capacity. It can descend more than 2,000 meters in a single dive, sustaining it for more than an hour and a half, without additional oxygen, without equipment. It does so by compressing its lungs almost to collapse, reducing its heart rate to 1 beat per minute and redistributing oxygen stored in the blood and muscles toward the brain and heart. Its spleen, enormous compared to that of any other similarly sized marine mammal, acts as a reservoir of red blood cells that are released at the start of the dive. In the head of the sperm whale, an organ that can occupy up to 1/3 of the animal's total length contains spermaceti, a mixture of waxes and oils that acts as an acoustic focusing system. The sperm whale produces echolocation clicks that reach 236 decibels, the most powerful sound recorded in any animal. In the depths where it operates, those clicks bounce off squid and return as echoes that the animal processes with such precision that it can calculate the size, distance, and speed of its prey in total darkness. The echo returns to the animal not through the external ears, but through the lower jaw, which acts as a bone conduction antenna directly connected to the inner ear. The prey it seeks at those depths is not small. The giant squid, Architeuthis, can reach 14 meters in total length, including its tentacles. But there is a second species that surpasses Architeuthis in body mass, the colossal squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, whose mantle can reach 4 meters and whose weight exceeds 500 kilograms. The tentacles of the colossal squid are equipped not only with tooth suckers, but with rotating chitin hooks that embed themselves into the flesh of any surface they contact. The circular scars that appear on the skin of sperm whales captured throughout the history of whaling are the physical testimony of those encounters. The sperm whale wins most of the time, not always. Adult females and their calves form stable matrilineal groups of 10 to 20 individuals that remain together for decades. When a young female has her first calf, the other females in the group participate in its care, sometimes nursing calves that are not their own. When a calf is accidentally separated from the group while the mother is on a deep dive, the other females remain at the surface guarding it until the mother returns. This network of collective care is the solution to a precise physiological constraint. Hunting dives can last 90 minutes, during which a calf that cannot dive to those depths is exposed. The group solves that problem by distributing responsibility, and that distribution requires trust, individual recognition, and long-term social memory, the same capacities that define the cohesion of any complex society. In the most extreme depths, beyond 6,000 meters, pressure destroys any conventional biological structure, and yet life is there. Hadal snailfish, measuring only 20 to 30 centimeters, have been documented at depths greater than 8,000 meters. Their cell membranes contain long-chain lipids that remain fluid only under extreme pressure. At normal pressure, those membranes would solidify. Their proteins are stabilized by molecules of trimethylamine oxide that counteract the denaturing effect of compression. These are organisms that would not survive at the surface. They are built for an environment that would destroy any other form of complex life. And in that environment, in 2019, during the expedition that reached 10,929 meters of the Challenger Deep, microplastics were found within the tissue of Hadal amphipods. The footprint of human industry reaches places where no human being has ever been. Between 4,000 and 5,000 meters, where the Pacific seafloor becomes a plain of fine sediments accumulated over millions of years, the feeding system changes again. There is no light, no strong currents, no active prey to hunt. What falls from above, marine snow, is the only energy input, the constant precipitation of organic matter from the illuminated layers toward the depths. Zooplankton feces, dead organisms, fragments of tissue, algal mucus. Each particle falls slowly at speeds of meters per hour and is intercepted, consumed, and reworked multiple times during its descent. What reaches the seafloor is less than 1% of surface primary production. But in those depths, that 1% sustains entire communities of sea cucumbers, polychaete worms, and chemosynthetic bacteria that have built their entire life cycles around an energy input that, seen from the surface, appears insignificant. There is a point in marine biology where size ceases to be the main variable. It is not the limit of the ocean, nor of physics. It is the limit of what can be achieved through brute force versus what can be achieved through coordination. Nowhere is that limit more visible than in the moment a pod of orcas enters a territory that until then was controlled by a great white shark. The shark does not fight, the shark flees. and it does not return to that area for weeks or months, even after the orcas have already left. The smell of their presence, the chemical signals they leave in the water, are enough to keep the most efficient solitary predator in the ocean in permanent retreat. The orca is not a whale. It is the largest dolphin on the planet, an odontocete cetacean whose brain, in terms of relative weight to body size and cortical complexity, is surpassed only by the human brain. But what makes orcas extraordinarily dangerous is not the size of the brain in the abstract. It is how they use it in groups. Orcas hunt in coordinated pods with a level of tactical sophistication that has no equivalent in any other marine predator. In the waters of Norway, when herring concentrate into massive schools during the winter, orcas work together to surround them, push them toward the surface, create a curtain of bubbles that acts as a virtual barrier, and then slap the school with their tails to stun or kill individual fish, which they then pick off calmly. The entire sequence requires temporal coordination among dozens of individuals. Each one performs a specific function that only makes sense if the others perform theirs at the same time. Off the coasts of Patagonia and in the sub-Antarctic islands, where seals and elephant seals gather on breeding beaches, orcas have developed a different technique transmitted exclusively through social learning. They swim in formation to generate synchronized waves that wash over ice floes or rocky platforms where the prey is resting, knocking them into the water. Orca calves observe these maneuvers for years before attempting them. Those that do not learn correctly or approach the shore too closely can strand themselves. That does happen, and the pod's mothers push them back into the water. Learning has a physical cost for both teacher and learner, and that cost is accepted because the technique, once mastered, guarantees access to a food source that no other predator can exploit with the same efficiency. Orca pods are not generic groups. They are cultural units with distinct acoustic dialects. Each pod has a specific variation of clicks and whistles used for communication, and that variation is recognizable in hydroacoustic recordings with the same precision as a human language. Calves learn the vocalizations of their mothers and retain them throughout their lives. When two pods that do not regularly interact meet, their dialects are mutually unintelligible. This cultural fragmentation occurred without geographic barriers, without physical separation. It occurred because social learning was faster than genetic pressure, and because cultural differences began to determine who hunts with whom, who reproduces with whom, and which techniques are transmitted and which are not. At the opposite end of the spectrum, the whale shark reaches 12 meters in length and can exceed 20 tons, making it the largest fish on the planet. Its mouth, up to 1.5 meters wide, filters several thousand liters of water per hour to extract plankton, fish eggs, and small crustaceans that make up its diet. It has no functional teeth. The ones it retains are vestigial, less than 6 millimeters in size. The gigantic structure of the whale shark is sustained entirely by organisms that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Its skin, up to 15 centimeters thick, is marked by a pattern of white spots on a dark background that is unique to each individual, like a fingerprint. Researchers use it to identify specific animals over years and to track their migratory routes, which cover thousands of kilometers and follow the seasonal pulses of plankton productivity with a precision that is still not fully explained. The ocean sunfish, Mola mola, represents a different evolutionary solution to the problem of size. It can exceed 3 meters in height and 2 tons in weight, but its morphology is neither that of a predator nor an efficient filter feeder. It lacks a conventional tail. The clavus, the structure at its rear end, is a modification of the dorsal and anal fins fused together, allowing slow turns but not sustained speed. Its survival strategy is not speed or strength. It is reproductive volume and passive resistance to predation. It can produce up to 300 million eggs in a single reproductive cycle, more than any other known vertebrate. And its skin, with a dense, gelatinous structure, makes it difficult to bite even for sharks. Predators that attempt to capture it often release it without managing an effective bite. The ocean sunfish periodically rises to the surface on its side, apparently motionless. It is not dying. It is thermoregulating. Solar heat warms its body after deep dives into cold waters where it feeds on jellyfish and siphonophores. The humpback whale crosses the North Pacific in migrations that span up to 8,000 kilometers, from feeding grounds in cold northern waters to tropical waters where it reproduces. It does not eat during the months it spends in the tropics. It lives off the reserves accumulated during the Arctic summer when it feeds almost continuously, consuming up to 1 ton of krill per day using a baleen system that filters water through its mouth. The bubble net feeding technique used by groups of humpbacks in feeding grounds requires one individual to swim in upward spirals beneath a school of krill or small fish, releasing bubbles that form a cylindrical curtain from which the prey does not attempt to escape, while the rest of the group ascends with mouths open through the center. The coordination requires each individual to know its role and execute it at the precise moment. As with orcas, that technique is learned and transmitted. Male humpback whales produce the most complex songs in the animal kingdom. A song can last between 10 and 20 minutes and is repeated without variation for hours. All males in a given ocean region sing the same version of the song at any given time, and that version changes over time. New phrases are introduced, others are abandoned, and the changes spread from individual to individual over months until the entire population has adopted the new version. It is cultural evolution in real time, documented through hydroacoustic recordings made over decades. The function of the song is not fully established. It may be a signal of fitness to females, it may be a coordination mechanism among males, it may be both. What is clear is that it is not random, and that the speed at which changes propagate indicates an active communication network spanning entire oceans. The Pacific walrus operates at the northern extreme of the system, in the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea, where sea ice dictates living conditions with brutal precision. An adult male can exceed 1,200 kilograms. Its tusks, present in both sexes, are not primarily hunting weapons. They are anchoring tools, used to drag itself across the ice and as support points when hauling out of the water. The walrus feeds almost exclusively on bivalve mollusks, which it extracts from the seafloor with its sensory whiskers and sucks directly from the shell using its tongue as a vacuum piston. An adult consumes several thousand clams per day. Beneath the ice, that abundance of mollusks exists because phytoplankton growing at the edge of the sea ice during the Arctic summer fertilizes the seafloor over decades. But when the ice retreats too far from the coast in summer, walruses cannot rest on floating platforms and instead concentrate massively on land. That concentration on shore, which is not their natural environment, generates stampedes that kill hundreds of calves crushed under the weight of adults. Pacific bottlenose dolphins represent another level of oceanic intelligence, different from that of orcas, but equally well documented in its consequences. In the waters of Shark Bay in Western Australia, a population of females has developed the use of sea sponges as tools. Females that use sponges carry them on their snouts while exploring the sea floor, using the porous material as protection against spines and rocks while they search for fish hidden in the sediment. This behavior is transmitted from mothers to daughters, not to sons, with a generational fidelity that suggests a cultural tradition more than 180 years old. Females that use sponges spend more time foraging alone and less time socializing than those that do not, which carries a documented social cost. It is one of the most detailed examples of tool use in wild cetaceans, and it raises a question that biology has not yet answered. How many other dolphin populations in oceans that no one has observed with enough continuity are doing something equivalent right now? The ocean absorbs approximately 30% of the carbon dioxide emitted by humanity each year. It is the planet's largest carbon buffer, and that function is not free. When CO2 dissolves in seawater, it reacts with the water to produce carbonic acid, which releases hydrogen ions. Those ions lower the pH of the water. Since the pre-industrial era, the average ocean pH has dropped from 8.2 to 8.1. 1/10 of a unit on the logarithmic scale corresponds to a 26% increase in hydrogen ion concentration. For corals, this acidification directly interferes with their ability to build calcium carbonate skeletons. In a more acidic ocean, carbonate dissolves instead of precipitating, and corals cannot calcify fast enough to maintain their structures. It is not that coral is fragile. It is that the chemical system that allows it to exist has operated for 250 million years within a pH range that is now moving out of that range faster than evolution can respond. Mass coral bleaching is not an isolated event. The first global-scale event was recorded in 1998, in an El Niño year that raised Pacific tropical temperatures above coral tolerance thresholds for weeks. 16% of the world's corals died that year. The second global event occurred between 2014 and 2017, affecting 2/3 of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The third began in 2023 and has not yet been fully documented. The intervals between bleaching events are decreasing. In the 1980s, a reef had on average 25 years to recover between severe bleaching episodes. Today, that interval has been reduced to less than 6 in many regions. Corals cannot complete their recovery cycle between one event and the next. The chain of effects triggered by coral loss does not respect the boundaries of reefs. The immediate first link is the species that can only reproduce within the architecture of living coral: fish that lay eggs in its crevices, crustaceans that pass their larval stages inside it, octopuses that depend on its cavities as daytime refuge. When the coral structure dies, those species do not migrate to another reef. In many cases, they simply fail to reproduce. The second link is the fish that feed on those species. The third is the predators that feed on those fish. The chain has no single, locally identifiable breaking point. It degrades gradually, with a time lag that can last years between cause and visible effect, making it extremely difficult to detect when a system has crossed a point of no return. Plastics in the ocean operate through different but equally systemic mechanisms. Between 19 and 23 million tons of plastic enter the ocean each year. Large objects fragment through ultraviolet light and wave-driven mechanical motion into increasingly smaller particles, but plastic does not biodegrade. It persists for centuries or millennia while fragmenting. Microplastics smaller than 5 millimeters are present in every square centimeter of ocean surface sampled to date, including the most remote regions. Nanoplastics, smaller than 1 micrometer, cross cellular membranes. They have been found in the lung, liver, and placental tissue of marine mammals, including humpback whales stranded on coasts around the world. Their biological effect at chronic concentrations is not fully established, but the presence of endocrine-disrupting compounds adsorbed onto plastic fragments has already been documented in multiple fish species, altering hormonal production and reproductive behavior. Sea turtles confuse floating plastic bags with jellyfish, which are an important part of their diet. They ingest them, cannot digest them, and the material accumulates in their digestive tract, blocking transit. Affected individuals lose weight, become less buoyant, cannot dive normally, and in severe cases die from obstruction or infection. This is not a marginal phenomenon. In samples taken along the main migratory routes of leatherback and hawksbill turtles, more than 50% of examined animals contained plastic in their digestive systems. A leatherback turtle can live more than 80 years and traverse the entire Pacific multiple times in its lifetime. Each of those crossings now takes place through an ocean with a concentration of microplastics that did not exist when the species evolved. Overfishing does not act only by reducing the number of fish. It acts by altering the age and size structure of populations. When the largest individuals of a species are systematically removed, these being the oldest and most fertile, the remaining population is composed of younger and smaller individuals. In fish, size and fecundity are directly correlated. A large female produces exponentially more eggs than a small female, and those eggs have a higher probability of survival because of the greater resources the mother can invest in each one. The selective removal of large individuals reduces the total reproductive capacity of the population far faster than models based only on catch numbers predict. Nearly 40% of shark and ray species are currently listed as threatened or endangered. Sharks take years to reach sexual maturity and produce few offspring per reproductive cycle. A population decimated by fishing takes decades to recover, and only if extractive pressure ceases completely. The effects of warming on orcas are less direct but no less real. Northern Pacific resident orcas, the ones specialized in Chinook salmon, depend on a single prey species that is declining due to the warming of the rivers where it reproduces, hydraulic dams that block its access to spawning grounds, and overfishing. When salmon abundance drops, resident orcas enter what veterinarians call chronic malnutrition. Pregnant females do not carry pregnancies to term, juveniles fail to develop the body mass needed to survive winter, and mortality rates exceed birth rates. The population of southern resident orcas in the Pacific, which in the 1970s had 99 individuals, today has fewer than 73, not because anyone directly hunts them, because the system they depend on is being altered in its most basic components from multiple points simultaneously. Against that scenario, there are response mechanisms that do work, although none at the speed that the magnitude of the problem would require. Marine protected areas where fishing is completely prohibited show, within 5 to 10 years, documented recoveries in fish biomass of up to 3 times previous levels. The recovery of large predators in those areas triggers cascading effects that restore ecosystem structure. When sharks return to an area from which they had been removed by fishing, the pressure they exert on mid-sized fish changes the behavior of those fish, which stop overgrazing certain reef areas, allowing coral to recover. It is the same logic observed in Yellowstone when wolves were reintroduced. The presence of the predator not only reduces prey numbers, but changes where and how they move, transforming the physical structure of the ecosystem. In Okinawa, biologists and divers work in coral restoration programs that consist of cultivating fragments of bleaching-resistant colonies in underwater nurseries and transplanting them into degraded reefs. The process is slow. A transplanted coral takes years to reach significant size and decades to contribute to reef structure. But in areas where transplants were carried out more than 10 years ago, the recovery of coral cover has brought back fish species that had disappeared, and those species have attracted their natural predators. The chain is rebuilt from the bottom up, slowly, and under the condition that water temperature does not again exceed the bleaching threshold during the recovery period. Corals that survived the 1998 bleaching in the Central Pacific showed, in subsequent decades, greater thermal resistance than their predecessors, suggesting that natural selection is operating in real time, accelerating the adaptation of colonies to higher temperatures. The problem is not the absence of adaptive mechanisms. The problem is speed. The rate at which the system is changing is faster than the rate at which evolution can respond. And the difference between those two speeds is measured in stretches of reef, in shark populations, in turtle nests, and in pods of orcas that are declining at this very moment, in oceans that most human beings will never see directly, but without which none can do. Excess nutrients entering the ocean from industrial agriculture through rivers are producing a phenomenon that is not visible from the surface but that alters the depths. Hypoxic zones, also called dead zones. When nitrates and phosphates reach the ocean in artificially high concentrations, they trigger massive algal blooms at the surface. When those algae die and sink, the bacteria that decompose them consume all the dissolved oxygen in the bottom water. The result is a zone where oxygen falls below the minimum level that any aerobic animal can tolerate. Fish and crustaceans that can move leave the area. Those that cannot move, such as mollusks, die in place. There are currently more than 400 documented hypoxic zones in the world's oceans. The one in the Gulf of Mexico, fed by the Mississippi River drainage, reaches an area of up to 20,000 square kilometers in summer. An underwater desert created not by a lack of nutrients, but by their excess. Underwater noise pollution is the most invisible and most underestimated disturbance of all. The ocean is an extraordinarily efficient sound transmission medium. Sound travels 4 times faster in water than in air and can propagate for hundreds or thousands of kilometers with little attenuation. Cargo ship engines generate continuous low-frequency noise that along major shipping routes creates a permanent sound curtain that overlaps exactly with the frequency range used by blue whales and fin whales to communicate over long distances. Before the era of massive maritime transport, those whales could communicate across thousands of kilometers through the oceans. Today, in the busiest shipping lanes, that distance has been reduced to hundreds of kilometers. Whales have responded by raising the pitch of their vocalizations to avoid traffic noise frequencies, which requires more energy and reduces signal range. In some cases, they have changed the timing of their songs, concentrating them in hours of lower maritime traffic. Adaptation is occurring, but it is being forced by a disturbance that has no precedent in the evolutionary history of the species. Artificial reefs, underwater structures deliberately deployed to create substrate for life to colonize, have shown surprising results in some contexts. Decommissioned oil platforms sunk in the Gulf of Mexico accumulate more fish biomass per square meter than any natural reef in the region. The metal structures become covered in algae, sponges, and cold water corals within months, and this coverage attracts invertebrates, which attract small fish, which attract mid-sized predators, which attract sharks. The colonization process follows exactly the same sequence as in any natural reef, with the difference that the initial substrate was placed in weeks rather than formed over tens of thousands of years. This does not make artificial reefs a solution to the collapse of natural ones. Coral reefs are irreplaceable in terms of species, diversity, structural complexity, and ecosystem services. But it shows that the ocean has a capacity for response that only activates if there is a surface on which to build. The North Pacific, where this documentary began, at the collision of currents off Japan, is not a static system. It changes with each season, with each degree of temperature, with each school of fish that appears or disappears. What we have seen here, from the reefs of Okinawa to the bottom of the Challenger Deep, from spawning beaches to abyssal plains, is a system whose complexity exceeds any model we have built to describe it. What we know with certainty is what can break. What we still cannot measure is how slowly it can rebuild.